Hi, this is Colton and Dylan, and they're going to share a couple of stories with you that they have experienced during clinical or during their summer jobs as a PCT.
I'll go first. So I had a quick story as a PCT. I work in the ICU, and it's in relation to our neuromuscular assessment that you might have seen me demonstrate. I had an interesting experience. I was working in the ICU dealing with a patient that was trying to come off sedation after being admitted for alcohol poisoning. Generally, patients who are alcoholics or known alcoholics that are on a medication called propofol come off of sedation fairly quickly because they have a resistance to it. This patient was off of sedation now for 4.5 hours with sedation completely stopped and still had not woken up yet. And so this was concerning to the nurse I was working with and me myself. The only thing that this patient was doing at this point was opening their eyes to a sternal rub. And when they were opening their eyes, the only thing that they were doing was that they were looking straight forward. They weren't tracking anything, which isn't a good sign in terms of neurofunction. So one of the times I went in the room to check on the patient, I went in, I did a sternal rub, and they opened their eyes like I had been doing for a few hours now. And the sister-in-law that was in the room got really excited when she was touching his feet at the bottom of the bed. She goes, "Oh, his foot twitched." And me thinking to myself, I said, well, that's not too exciting. It's been 4.5 hours and he's still not awake. That's not anything too significant. And just me being a nursing student in nursing school, out of sheer curiosity, decided to pull out my pen in my pocket, and I decided to do the Babinski reflex on this patient without my nurse being anywhere near me telling me to do it. I just took it upon myself just because I was curious. And it turns out the patient had a positive Babinski sign, which is bad. Once you learn about that sign, his toes fanned up and out, and so that, as you know, is a sign of central nervous system damage. So I went running to my nurse and I told him about it. And so he went in, assessed himself, and confirmed that he did indeed have a positive Babinski sign. And so we went ahead and we called the doctor and we ordered an ammonia level, and at that time I had to leave, and I went home really unhappy because I wanted to see what was going on with that patient. Luckily I was working the next day, and so I came into work, and the nurse taking over for that patient was Gabriel. He is a nurse that graduated from ACU in the first cohort. And so I met up with Gabe and I said to him, "What's going on?" And he told me that the ammonia came back, and he said that it was high. Ammonia indicates that there is toxins inside the body. And so I said, okay, what's the next course of action for this patient? He said the doctor ordered an MRI. I asked him to bring me down, and he said, okay. So I went down to MRI with this patient, and I was sitting next to the radiologist, and she goes, "There's your problem." The patient had a major brainstem stroke, and that to me was just incredibly shocking. Turns out that patient ended up having to leave for hospice care because they were in what was called lock-in syndrome. All that they were able to do from that point was open their eyes. While they were on the sedation, they ended up having that stroke, and now they were stuck in a state of quadriplegia. They could only open their eyes. They were aware of everything going on around them, but they couldn't do anything about it. And eventually, once they were off the ventilator, they would be unable to breathe over that ventilator, and so they would go into a respiratory arrest. So as sad as that situation was, and the fact that that patient ended up having to go to hospice care, I just wanted to share that story with everyone because it's a situation where I found myself advocating for a patient to the nurse, being curious because I was a student and using things I learned in nursing school to find something that would have been found eventually, but just out of curiosity I got to use some critical thinking and see something that I otherwise wouldn't have got to see. So I wanted to share that with you all.
Um, yeah, you're going to hear a lot in nursing school about being a patient advocate and therapeutic communication. And one day during clinicals, I had a chance to go sit down and talk with one of my patients, and he was an older man in fantastic health. He had diabetes, took great care of it. He was in because he had cellulitis in his leg. And he had been super compliant his entire time there. But when the doctor came in and told him that they wanted to cut open his leg to clean it out, he got very aggressive, was telling him, he didn't want to do that, he refused. So I got to come in and I was talking to him just about life, trying to, find out who he is as a person, and found out his brother had recently died. And he died because he had the same thing, he had cellulitis, he got an infected leg, he had to get it amputated. And then his other leg got amputated for a similar reason, and then ended up dying a few weeks later. And he was by himself, nobody around him, and talking to him, he broke out into tears. He was terrified to die like his brother did. And so I was able to, sit down, talk with him, put my hand on his shoulder, calmed him down. Now I was able to go to the doctor and the nurse and tell them why he was refusing and help them understand why he was deciding to do what he was doing. And they were able to go talk to him, talk about his fears, and they were actually able to get him to go into surgery and help him.
That's excellent because, often nurses and doctors are in a rush because they have such a heavy load that they don't stop to ask, and get to the bottom of a question or a concern. And so advocacy is something you do from every part of nursing, no matter whether it's just a basic assessment. And, here in this class, your assessments are going to be on normal people, your classmates. But when it's in real life, you're going to come across all sorts of different things that aren't your textbook normals. But communication is a big part of whatever part of nursing that you're in. Thank you guys so much for everything you've done today to help these incoming students.